Let's get started tying flies. The first fly we're going to tie is a woolly worm, and with it we're going to illustrate the principles of applying a body to a fly, in this case a chenille body, and applying a hackle to a fly, in this case a palmered hackle. So let's start tying. We're going to attach our thread to the hook using a jam knot, which I illustrated in a previous video clip. Now, if you're following the video clips, you'll remember in that particular segment, once I got the thread attached to the hook, I then clipped off this tag end to get it out of the way so that you could see the next few techniques that I wanted to illustrate. Here, I'm going to leave this tag end of thread attached, and I'm going to do that because it's going to allow me to create a thread base along the shank of my hook. It's a good idea to create a thread base when you tie flies along the shank of the hook, because material that's tied onto a bare hook will tend to slip or rotate or slide out of place. It's much less likely to do that if you tie the material on a base of thread. So that's what we're going to do here. So to create my thread base, I'm going to keep my tag end intact, and I'm going to pull it back on a 45-degree angle and keep it rather taut. And as I make successive wraps of thread, I'm going to wrap up into that tag end a little bit. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow successive wraps of thread to slide down the tag end and lie in apposition to one another. And in that way I can create a nice, smooth, and even thread base with very few gaps or bumps. So we're going to wrap this all the way back to the bend of the hook. And as we get closer to the bend of the hook, as we approach the point of the hook, you're going to want to swing your thread forward and out of the way of the point of the hook, so that you don't accidentally clip your thread on the point of the hook, which may snap your thread off, and then you'd have to start over. So let's continue wrapping back to the bend of the hook. Right about there is good. Maybe a few more wraps. And at this point we're going to cut this tag end of thread off. We'll make one or two wraps just to secure that last little piece of tag end. And now we're ready to apply our materials. We're going to start by applying our body material, which is chenille, which is basically a fluffy little rope. It's like a pipe cleaner type of a material without the firm core. So you have a soft, fuzzy, kind of a pliable material here. Now, to tie this in, we're going to come to the end of our chenille, and we're going to take our thumb and finger, and we're just going to pinch off some of this fuzzy material at the end to expose this inner core, this inner thread core of the chenille. And when we tie in, we're going to tie in by this thread core, because that'll allow us to secure our material to the hook a little firmer, a little more securely than if we tried to bunch down and tie up through all of this fuzzy stuff. So we've got our core exposed, and we're going to place that against the hook, and using our pinch wrap we're going to secure it into place. We'll do about 3 pinch wraps, and you see that secures our material pretty firmly in place. Going to make a few more wraps forward to bind down this braided core, this little thread core, just a little more securely. And then we're going to clip the butt ends of it off. 1 or 2 more wraps here just to get that last little bit of butt end. And now we're going to bring our thread back to where we tied the chenille in. Now let's tie in our hackle feather. Now for this particular fly, we're going to use a very large, very soft, very webby feather. This is a wet fly hackle. And it's a wet fly hackle because the barbs are very soft, and it's very thick, it's very webby. This is a fly that's meant to be fished under the water. So you want these nice soft barbs, which will give the fly a little bit better action underwater. So to prepare this feather for tying in, we're going to hold it by the tip, and we're going to stroke down the quill of the feather towards the butt end of it, so that these barbs these feather barbs stick out perpendicular to the quill. Stroke it down a couple of times, and that looks pretty good there. Get one or two more barbs out here. And at this point we're going to flip the feather around, and we're going to pull these barbs back to expose just a little piece of quill there. And that's where we want to tie this in by. So we're going to rest that against the shank of the hook, position it where we want it, and again using a pinch wrap, we're going to secure this feather onto the shank of the hook. And we're going to make a few wraps forward now toward the eye of the hook. Tie down some of this feather tip till we're sure that it's secure, which it is now. And then we're going to clip this excess stuff out of the way. Now we're going to advance our thread back up to the eye of the hook. But we're going to stop just a little bit short of the eye of the hook. One of the most common mistakes that you can make as a fly tyer is to crowd the eye of the hook, or to have your thread wraps and your material to be tied off too close to the eye of the hook. What that does is it creates a large bulk around the eye, and sometimes it will clog the eye up with material, and you can't get your fishing line through there then to actually tie the fly on the line. So we're going to leave a little bit of space from where our thread is, where we're going to tie our material off, from that point to the eye of the hook. That'll leave us some space to create a thread head and to do our final whip finish knot to finish this fly. Now let's wrap our body. Now, one of the primary rules in fly tying is that you always wrap material away from you. There will be times where you want to purposely break that rule, but for the most part, a good rule of thumb is that you always want to wrap things in the same direction, and it's over the hook and away from you. So we're going to lift our feather up out of the way. We're going to grab our chenille, and we're going to start wrapping our chenille away from us around the hook. Now, for the woolly worm, you want to make your first wrap of chenille behind the feather. At this point, switch hands, pull the feather back a little bit, and make your next wrap in front of the feather. And that will just help to secure that feather just a little bit better. Now you continue to wrap your chenille forward in touching turns around the shank of the hook, and you'll see as we're wrapping that we're starting to form a nice fuzzy body for our fly. And we're going to bring this up right to about here. Again, we don't want to crowd the eye of the hook. Now we're going to tie this material off. We're going to hold it with our right hand, take our left hand, wrap up and across the material, kind of trap it against the hook shank. Do that once or twice. And then we can switch hands, make a few more wraps, secure the material down a little firmer. And once we're sure that it's secured on, we can then come in and clip the chenille out of the way. Get rid of that there. Okay. So that's our body. Now we're going to wrap our hackle feather. We're going to hold the feather up at a right angle to the hook, and we're going to start stroking the barbs of the feather back for this particular fly, for this. Because we want these, when this is wrapped, we want these barbs to angle back toward the bend of the hook. So we're going to stroke our barbs back, and we're going to wrap our feather around the hook. Pull it up in front. And again, with each wrap, going to stroke our barbs up, stroke them back. And we're going to wrap this feather in a palmer fashion. And basically that means non-touching turns, or spiral wrapping your feather up the shank of the hook. Now as we continue to do this, ideally the quill of the feather will kind of nestle down in between the wraps of chenille that you made. essentially burying the quill and leaving only the barbs to stick up. So we're going to continue this process, stroking and wrapping. Right up to where you tied the chenille off. And when you get to this point, I always like to make maybe one extra wrap of hackle that's actually in touching turns at the head of the fly, because I think it gives it a little more bulky, a little fuller collar. Okay, so that looks pretty good to me. So now we're going to hold our feather forward a bit, grab our thread, wrap up through the feather, trap the quill of the feather against the hook. And we're going to do that 1 or 2 times, and then switch hands and make a few more wraps just to secure that in there. And again, once we're sure that it's secured, we're going to come in with our scissors and we're going to snip this hackle feather right out of the way. So far so good, we're just about done. Now we're going to make a few more wraps to build the head of the fly with our thread. And that looks pretty good there. So that's a pretty nice head to that fly. And now we're going to whip finish our fly at our final knot. And again, I covered a whip finish, how to do a whip finish, in a prior video segment, so you can refer to that if you have questions. And we lance our thread off. And there we have a woolly worm. Just one more thing to do. We're going to take our head cement and just add a little bit of glue to the head of this fly. Take a toothpick, dip it into the head cement, and we're going to just touch the thread, and you see the cement just wicks right in to secure those thread wraps down. So there you have it. That's a woolly worm, and with it we illustrated the principle of applying a body to a fly and applying a Palmer hackle to a fly.